Is Deebo Samuel the next great 49ers receiver? We'll be discussing that and much more regarding the 49ers free agency, moves, and rumors on today's edition of the Jack Hammer Show. Hey, everybody, this is Jack Hammer. I cover the 49ers for the Santa Rosa Press-Democrat. And on today's show, as I mentioned at the opening, I wanted to come in and talk a little bit about Deebo Samuel and the possibility of him being the next great 49ers receiver, discuss a little bit about the 49ers free agency moves to this point, a little bit some rumors that have been swirling around the 49ers as well, and we'll also touch on Jimmy Garoppolo. But as I said, let's start off with Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel, when you go back and you look at what he has been able to accomplish in the first 3 years, it's extremely impressive. In 2019, as a rookie, he was second in the 49ers history in terms of yards, receiving yards. He actually broke the record for 49ers receivers with 57 receptions. That's the most ever for a 49ers rookie wide receiver. On top of that, 2020 was a little bit of an injury season. But then he bounced back in 2021. It was going spectacularly. If you go back and you look at the numbers for Deebo Samuel last season, he was on pace for 1,857 yards, I believe, right in that area until the 49ers offense and Kyle Shanahan needed to make a change. And so Deebo Samuel was moved from his wide receiver role to more of what he called a wide back. You go back and you look through the numbers through the first half of the season, the first 8 games that Deebo Samuel played in 2021, he was targeted 81 times in the first 8 games, 10 targets per game. Over the second half of the season, once they moved him into the wide back role, at that point, his numbers slowed down. Instead of being targeted 10 times a game, he was only targeted 5, and that was because of a number of times that he was running the ball. Again, if they had kept him on the pace that he was going on, his total would have eclipsed Jerry Rice's single season high of 1,884 that he had in 1995. 1,884 was Jerry Rice's most yards from scrimmage, but that wouldn't have been the case. He would have surpassed his yardage total. Even though Samuel didn't have the targets down the stretch, he made up for that with the run plays. When you go back and you look at what Deebo Samuel did in 2021, his 1,770 total yards from scrimmage trails only Rice's 1,884 yards from scrimmage, a single season high for a receiver in 49ers history. So he's right on the doorstep of possibly being able to be discussed amongst a guy like Jerry Rice. The difference is, obviously, when you look at Jerry Rice's career, he played for 20 plus years. Not all of that was in San Francisco, but he played for a long time. It was an extended period of time. I wouldn't expect to see a wide receiver be able to break any of Jerry Rice's records when it comes to career longevity. I would not foresee a player, especially that plays with the physicality of Deebo Samuel, getting over that number. And I wouldn't expect to see really any wide receiver across the league, even a guy like Cooper Kupp, who broke a number of Jerry Rice's records this year because of the extra game that he played. He wouldn't. I don't see him being able to last long enough to be able to do this. You got to remember, Jerry Rice played until I think he was 41 or 42. Wide receivers usually don't last that long. So Jerry Rice was definitely in a class by himself. But when you start discussing what Deebo Samuel brought to the 49ers in 2021 and what he could bring to them moving forward, it's a lot more. The discussion is a lot closer than I think a lot of people want to make it out to be. Jerry Rice played with Joe Montana, Steve Young. Those were his two primary quarterbacks. The quarterback discussion has been brought up with regards to Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel playing with C.J. Beathard and Nick Mullins and Jimmy Garoppolo compared to what Rice played with during his time with the 49ers. But I think you need to take a little bit of a step back. That's really not an argument that I'm willing to die on that hill, because when you look at what Jerry Rice did when it didn't have Joe Montana and Steve Young, he had a number of games that he played with Jeff Camp, Alvis Gerbach, Mike Morosky, and a bunch of other folks. And in those seasons, in those games, if you take his career numbers there and it averages out to, I believe, Swan Song on Twitter, who is usually on my shows in the chat section, he had mentioned it was about almost just under 1,500 yards, so like 1,450 or somewhere in that ballpark was what a season for Jerry Rice with quarterback not named Montana and Young with the 49ers turned out to be. So pretty good, pretty heady stuff there. And obviously Jerry Rice is I consider Jerry Rice probably the greatest of all time. I think right now Deebo is probably the best wide receiver in the NFL today. So that's how I would put it. I put Deebo, Jerry is the best of all time. Deebo is the best of right now. And I think if Deebo gets the opportunity to go out and make the plays and do this for a while and he can stay healthy, that's the question mark with Deebo Samuel's health. More than anything else, it's the health, because he had the health issues while he was at South Carolina, and those have carried over a little bit to his time with the 49ers. It started off, early, missing a game early in 2019, only played 7 games in 2020, and then last season he missed 1. He played 16 of the 17 games last season. So that's why when I compare the numbers from Rice to Samuel between 2021 and Rice's best statistical yards from scrimmage season, which was 1995, I don't worry about the games played because they both played the same in numbers. So Victory Street Ministry, and I agree with this one. He comes on, he says that John Taylor is the most underrated. He was so good, teams couldn't focus on Jerry. And that's another piece of it as well, is that Jerry Rice did have John Taylor. He had Dwight Clark in the early days. There were some different things going on, but John Taylor is a guy who I find to be very underrated, even though he went into the 49ers Hall of Fame this last year. I think some of the younger 49er fans who just look at the numbers, who didn't really watch John Taylor play, might miss some of the stuff with him. So that's my starting point is Deebo Samuel. I got a couple of folks though that are holding on. I'm gonna go to CarCast first. Are you there, CarCast?
Hey Jack, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right. Finally we get to talk something that's not related to Jimmy Garoppolo, so I'm excited. Yeah. So about Deebo Samuel, I want to keep it on topic. I honestly think Deebo Samuel is better than Cooper Kupp. I want to compare them two. I've been comparing them all year. Last year, I'm getting to the reason why Samuel had 0 Pro Bowl votes is because who's their quarterbacks? Who's the Rams quarterback and the 49ers quarterback that season? It was Jimmy Garoppolo and Matthew Stafford. And in a heartbeat, anyone would pick Matthew Stafford over Jimmy Garoppolo, right? It all just comes back to the quarterback play. But like with Jimmy G, I kind of think it has an advantage on Deebo Samuel because Deebo Samuel had a chance to do more. But with Matthew Stafford, you just get to be an all-around, great wide receiver. And I'm not saying it's a good thing about Jimmy G. I'm just saying Jimmy G gives you more more things to pick out of the hat and do. So Deebo Samuel with Jimmy G got to run the ball. He even got some deep passes, on that. I think 3rd and 5 in the Week 18 game, that clutch catch, and he had 15 yards after the catch. And Jimmy G threw that. He stepped up in the pocket and threw that. So I'm not saying it's a good thing he has to do all that stuff. I'm just saying when you compare I'm not saying Cooper Kupp's bad or anything. I'm just saying if you compare these two side by side, honestly, in my opinion, I'm gonna pick Deebo Samuel. I just think he's a more versatile player. I think he's just more physical. I think he can get off the line of scrimmage more quickly. He has physical ability. He's bigger, and yeah, he's just more versatile. And I think he can just do more stuff in the offense, in Shannon's offense and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, I think they're different types of players, but I also think that Deebo Samuel, we haven't seen everything that he can do because let's just face it, there's times that he's running open down the field and the ball doesn't come his way because the quarterback couldn't get it to him, and those types of things. So that's the only part with the Jimmy Garoppolo stuff. Beyond that, I'm really trying to stay away from blaming it on the quarterback play. Like I said, Jerry Rice had some really good games and really good seasons playing without Joe Montana and Steve Young, even though they were the two primary quarterbacks during his career there. I just think that we need to just try to separate it and let's just look at the play of the player. And if you just take the play of the player with what we saw from Deebo Samuel this year, the numbers that he was putting up until they moved him into the wide back role were on pace to put up to be the second best, either the first or second best numbers, total yardage by a 49ers wide receiver in terms of receiving yards in the history of the team. Jerry Rice has the top number, but Samuel was on pace to be just below that or just a little bit right in that same ballpark as that 1,800 yard season that Jerry Rice had. So we don't talk about Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp is a phenomenal player that it's different. He has a different style, obviously, with the way that he's not running through people and he's not getting yards as much on the ground in the running game. But I think in Jerry Rice's day, there were a lot of really good quarterbacks then too, right? I mean, not quarterbacks, but receivers. There were a number of other star receivers that were playing in the league, but shoot, Rice just transcended everything because he played for so long. Did I lose you? Oh, I think I lost him. Let me jump over. Let me jump over to Swan. Are you there, Swan?
Hey,
look at that! You got Jerry with you.
I had to.
That's awesome.
Deebo is amazing. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And even when he started off as a rookie, it was like you saw something kind of like, wow, this guy's special. It's like he's doing things that like we haven't seen in quite a bit. I think I'm not there with Deebo yet. Don't get me wrong, he had an amazing season. He was big for us. When you're saying Jerry Rice, right? I'm not there in that. I mean, of course, Jerry Rice has the whole career, so it's easy for me to say that, right? But
yes.
There was points of Jerry Rice, like when he was, let's say, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, like during those years, is like every time the ball was thrown to him, he'd catch it. Like it didn't matter if it was below his knees, behind his, like it was underthrown or up on top. He always, don't get me wrong, it didn't always happen like that. But when it did, he'd make these amazing catches where you're like, how? Like every time, and it was so consistent where like you don't take it for granted because every time you see it, you're like, wow, right? And I think I've told you this before, but I grew up in a household where all my brothers were Rams fans, right? They're all Rams fans. Like I didn't root for the Niners until I was young, right? It was like an 84 Super Bowl against the Bengals. I didn't even really know about football. I just knew that my brothers watched it a lot. My oldest brother watched it a lot, and I just watched it. I didn't know anything about it, And I was like, who's that team? And they're winning, and I'm like, I want that team. And I go, where's San Francisco at? They're all, it's in California. I was like, okay, that's my team now, right? So I was fortunate to do that. But like, I remember watching these games as I gotten older, and then I started knowing more about the game. Like even my brothers who were Rams fans hated Jerry. Like they hated him, but loved him. Like, you know what I mean? They respected him. They're like, man, that guy, he's double him, triple him, stop him, And like every time he's making these catches where you're like, what? How does he keep on doing this? So I'm not there yet with Deebo. I think the element that Deebo brings that Jerry doesn't, though, is the physicality, right? Because if you watch Jerry Rice throughout his career, most of the time he's either running out of bounds or getting down quick. Like he always had this ability to right before he was going to get hit, right? Like when he knew that he couldn't stretch this out to a TD, he would dive, like kind of like duck in, like he'd always do that, right? And that's probably one of the reasons why he could play for 20 years, right? And but that element that Deebo brings, that pumps up the team, right?
Yeah.
When you do
Yes.
that, especially with our team where it's about physicality, like that's gonna that gets people pumped, right? When you see him like, hey, he's giving it all out, he's doing this, and I love it. I'm always scared though, I'm always scared because all it takes is one hit, or whatever, and he's gonna be out for 4 games, right? Or whatever, 3 games, 2 games, whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
thank God that hasn't happened yet, but yeah, I'm not there in my faith for Deebo. I mean, don't get me
Yes.
wrong. I love him. I want to keep him, pay him as much as we think that it's going to make sense, right? I think what you said in the 23, 25 million range, I think that's fair. I think if anything over than that, I don't know if the 49ers do it, right?
Yeah, I don't. Well, I mean, if you're talking over that, then you're talking about more than anybody else, because even the deal that just got signed by Tyreek Hill, I know it's reported at 30 million, but when you look at the actual, what it's really going to end up being is like 24 million. I think it is 25. So that's why I say the 23 to 25 just seems about right because the only thing that holds back Deebo Samuel is the injury issue from that he has, because he hasn't played a full season yet. He played 16 games this last year, 7 the year before, and I think 15 in his rookie season. So the only thing I will disagree with you about a little bit, and obviously Jerry Rice had great hands. I'm not knocking that, but just if you go back to his rookie season, he had some issues catching the ball his rookie season. That's why people were the writers at the time were calling him a bust, and is this guy any good, and that kind of stuff.
And then he had this breakout game, right? Like in week 16 or whatever it was.
Yeah, late in the season.
Yards or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was pressing and all that stuff. But I was just saying, like, at third year, fourth year, fifth year, there was a point where it's just, like, this guy doesn't drop passes. Like, I mean, of course he drops passes. Everyone does. I've seen it. I've seen him drop passes, right? And but it's just making those hard ones so routine is what's ultimate faith. So when he dropped one, you weren't even mad. You're like, just okay, he's human, whatever, it's like
right.
But yeah, so I get what you're saying. I totally get it. I mean, 49er fans should be very excited that we could have a potential the next, wide receiver great, right? We had Rice, we had T.O., Deebo. I mean, it's 1 year, but granted, he flashed his rookie year. If he wasn't, I mean, he wasn't the number one option then, now he's going to be unmistakably the number one option, right? And then he gives us, Jerry Rice did end arounds and stuff as well. He did jet sweeps, but I mean, they never lined him up in the backfield. I've never seen that.
No, they I don't remember them ever lining up in the backfield, like giving him the ball in the backfield. But the only time he ran the ball was, like you said, like on a reverse or some kind of a sweep. That kind of looked like a reverse the way that it was set up.
And then what you also say too is that, Deebo doesn't get really the whole route tree either, just because of the limitations that we have at QB or, whatever, right? Like, he's not like Jerry ran every route and he would get, you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that Deebo can't do that. I'm just saying that I think with how the game is schemed with Jimmy, you're not going to see so much of a variety of, like, post routes, out routes, like, you know what I'm saying? Like the variety that Jerry had, like it just threw him out everywhere in the field, whatever,
Yeah, we haven't really seen Deebo Samuel deep that often.
Yeah.
Right. He's usually underneath to the middle. He's running the post. He's running slants and all those kind of things. He does a lot of things similar routes to Jerry Rice, but we don't see him running the deep post. It's usually it's usually Brandon Ayuk or one of the other receivers that's doing that, where he's usually kind of more of an underneath guy. So I can understand why people would say that, but I do think that he has the ability to, if they called upon it. But the way that they use him in the offense right now, I think Ayuk is more of that downfield threat. He's the stretcher, and we'll see what happens when Trey Lance takes over this year, if it changes a little bit.
Yeah, and what's crazy about Deebo too is that I mean, Jerry had his explosion. There's no doubt about it. I don't care what people say about his 40 time, and it's funny as that gets documented to be higher and higher every year. I remember when in the 90s it was like 4.5, and then it went to 4.6, and now they're saying 4.7. Like, oh, come on, let's stop the madness already. But I mean, he had bursts, but the way that Deebo, the stop and go burst, it's crazy. And at that size, it's I haven't seen it in a while. Like, you know, Terrell Owens had burst as well. They just look different just because, you know, T.O. is long, you know, like he's long, you know, where Deebo is stout, right? Like
yeah, Deebo was taller, but they're similar in that they're both pretty thick.
Yeah.
Like Terrell Owens, I can remember like early on, he almost looked like a tight end. I mean, he was really thick, and he would you would see him run through people, right?
Yeah.
Not run. He didn't. You never saw him run through people like what Deebo Samuel did to that poor safety of the Falcons. Right. But you would see him run through arm tackles.
Yeah,
and that kind of stuff.
Definitely physicality was part of his game, and he had a problem with you know, drops too. Like, I think he actually drops more than Deebo if my memory serves me correctly, or at the same amount, you know.
Well, yeah, he did. That's what goes back to. That's why he was crying after he caught the touchdown pass against the Packers in that playoff game, because he dropped the ball. Like, he had dropped a touchdown. He dropped like 3 or 4 passes at least in that game, and then he finally caught the game's on the line. He finally held on to the dang thing.
I remember back when he came into the league, and you know, at that time, you know, we didn't have the media that we do now, right? You had kind of scratch and claw. At least for me, living in LA, you had a scratch and claw for every type of little news item. And I remember, I think it was either a preseason game or a week 1 game, and Madden was saying, yeah, you know, the 49ers drafted J.J. Stokes, but they got this one kid in the 5th round or whatever round we got T.O. in from Tennessee Chattanooga, who they really like, you know, and he was like, he had a great camp. And then, of course, you hear that and you're like, oh, that's cool. But how many times have you heard that, right? Like, you hear that all the time, right? Like, oh, there's some new kid. And then all of a sudden, it's like T.O. and he's like making all this noise. I was like, wow, man, we really have another guy? I mean, I like T.O. I didn't like the diva-ness about, like, he went ultra diva, you know, like, don't get me wrong. Jerry had some diva too, you know, like, yeah. I mean, Jerry,
he definitely did.
Jerry says he doesn't care about numbers. He cares about numbers, you know, like, as much as Jerry says he cares about numbers.
Absolutely.
But he did it in a classier way. You know what I'm saying? Where T.O. was really more arrogant, up, you know, in your face, you know, about it, you know?
Yes.
I did that one soundbite that he has is, I love it. There was, I love me some me. I love me some me.
Yeah, that's one of the things. Like, if you watch the Jerry Rice Football Life documentary, they talk about that. They talk about how his time was starting to run out with the 49ers. The like the T.O. and the younger receivers that were coming along, how they weren't like, you know, they were flashier. They were, you know, although Jerry obviously had his flash because he, you know, he had to make sure everything was right with his towel and all that kind of stuff. You know, everything had to be perfect. But I remember them talking about that it was definitely a different crop of folks.
Yeah. And I remember, like, Bill Walsh used to always say, like, hey, you score a touchdown, just give it back to the ref. Like, give it, like, show that you've done this before. You know what I mean? Like, it's like not a big deal, right?
Was that Bill Walsh that said that? I don't know.
Well, maybe it wasn't Bill Walsh.
I don't know, but I remember. No, but a lot of people said that. That's one of the things that I always enjoyed about Barry Sanders, right? You see Barry Sanders score a touchdown, he just walks over, flips the ball to the ref, and jogs off the field with his teammates.
Barry was incredible.
Yeah.
I don't think I still haven't seen a player till this day look as electric as him.
Oh, like, no, Barry Sanders was amazing.
Still haven't seen it.
Yeah, the things that you talk about stop and start ability. You know, there's the one the playoff run that they always show, that playoff run against the Cowboys, where they have no idea where he is because he's starting and stopping and, you know, bopping and jiving, and he's gone.
Imagine if he was under that line, that Dallas line in the 90s.
Right.
Imagine. Right? He'd have like 10,000 yards.
Well, the only thing there is that I wonder how he would have been if he was in more of a traditional system that didn't allow him to, where he had to kind of more run because he the system in Detroit, I think, was like a little bit more zone based. So he was finding his holes and picking and choosing based off of kind of like what the 49ers do now when they run their zone, outside zone and stuff. Whereas the Cowboys were a little bit more power. It would have been interesting to see his ability in an offense like that.
How mad? Okay, so now we're talking about Deebo, right? So, and we've heard all these rumors. I mean, I don't know if they're not real. They can't be real. But I mean, there is a scenario where if Deebo and his agent push too far, we know Prague is like, he kind of reminds me of like, you go to a car dealership and they bring out the heavy negotiator, like that dude, and he's that dude, right? And when push comes to shove, man, look what they did to Defoe.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
man, if that happens, if we lose Deebo, I don't know.
I think that would be a tough one. If Deebo Samuel was to leave, I think that would be a tough one. I think 49er fans would be very frustrated if Deebo Samuel was traded this season or, in the next couple of years, just because of trying to save some money or something like that.
Yeah, and plus with the cap going up, I mean, just backload the contract. They'll be fine in 2 years from now, right? Because the first 2 years is not going to be that big of a deal, right?
Yeah,
and they can always restructure, like they'll probably restructure Trent Williams' contract next year. Like his goes up to $26 million, his cap figure.
Yeah, see, I'm nervous about that though, because you start talking about now you're talking about one of the older players. I don't have problems when you're restructuring some of your younger guys that have maybe a little bit, like a Fred Warner or Eric Armstead, who have a little bit more longevity. But Fred Warner or Trent Williams is what, 32, 33 already. So you start to extend him out. That's when it becomes a problem. We'll see what they do, but you could be right. I mean, if we went in there and looked at their numbers next year at this time, we'd probably be saying that it'd make sense to do that with him.
Yeah, and the thing is, I mean, I know Trent he's been dealing with, he's always has an injury, right? Like he misses a couple games every year, and I'm fine with that. You just got to live with it, right? It's football. He's so amazing that you're just okay. We live with it, right? It was tough seeing him hurt in the NFC Championship game because he was a shell of himself. It was tough being like the best player in the NFL and then just getting, in some plays where that's not him. You know what I mean? Like look at him, like he's losing. I mean, he still wants some, but he lost some that or we're like, whoa, you never see that Trent get beat that bad unless it's Alden Smith. But
right.
But yeah, so yeah, it's I hope I love Deebo. I hope we keep him. Like that'd be a great weapon to be paired up with Lance, for the next 4 or 5 years or whatever. And
yeah, I'm gonna jump over to. I have another caller that I'm gonna hit real quick, just because I got about 10 more minutes before I've got to run. But if the 49ers trade Deebo Samuel, they're making a huge mistake, because this is the guy who was their heart and soul last year.
Yeah,
right. He is their lone breakout threat in terms of Brandon Ayuk is going to be a good receiver, I think, under when he has somebody who can throw the ball down the field to him. But Deebo Samuel, there's not a player on the 49ers that has the ability to do what he does with his hands with the ball in his hands that Deebo Samuel does.
Yeah, and also with Brandon is like the type of personality is different, right? Deebo is as far as just his personality, he's a wide receiver one. You know what I mean? Ayuk is more. I'm not saying that Ayuk isn't great. He is great, but his personality is more introverted. He's more like a wide receiver 2 personality. I don't know if that has anything to do with it. That's just, a quick take, but.
Yeah, no, he just doesn't. I'm not going even like into the personality thing, but when it comes to Brandon Ayuk, they try to do some of the same things with him that they do with Deebo Samuel, but he just doesn't have the explosiveness to do that. On the screens and stuff like that. He's not he's not going to turn the screen in the NFC Championship game into a touchdown like Deebo Samuel did. He might do it if he's able to like break the first, if it's wide open in front of him, and then jump over the guy down the field like he did against Philly in his rookie season. But he's not going to be the constant, like, just get the ball in his hands and watch him run that you see from Deebo Samuel.
Yeah.
So, all right, Swan, I'm glad you called in after all of our arguing this week. I appreciate you calling in. That was fun.
All right. Thanks, Jack.
All right. Take care.
The man right there. The man.
That's right. Jerry. Those were the old days. All right. Take care.
See you.
All right. I'm going to jump in with Victory. How you doing?
Good. How's it going, Jack?
I'm good. I haven't talked to you before.
Yeah, I follow you, and it's nice to talk. Nice to be able to talk with you. I think this is a good subject. And one thing I want to say is I think Deebo, what we're seeing with Deebo is kind of revolutionizing the game in a similar way that we saw Roger Craig revolutionize the game. Similar how we saw Marshall Faulk. When you're seeing somebody that can run and catch the ball like he does, I think what we're seeing is really, really special. You guys talked about Barry Sanders. I mean, I'd be hard-pressed to think of somebody that reminds me more of Barry Sanders than Deebo from the waist down, those tree trunk legs, right?
Yes.
And so I think the Niners would be incredibly foolish to let Deebo walk, because he takes the 49ers offense to such a different level. And with the quarterback that can stretch the field, maybe we could see those deeper shots like we saw against Detroit or against Baltimore his rookie year, those underthrown deep balls that he made plays on.
Yeah, right. We saw it this year against Detroit in week 1. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Exactly. So I'm thinking, with the play action shots, it's going to be more than just dig routes. It's going to be more than just middle of the field. And I mean, to think that the guy can play running back and take it to the house at any time. You could throw a screen to him and he can take it to the house at any time. He can run down the field. He can kick return. I mean, come on now. I don't know that there's anybody like him in the game right now.
Yeah, I agree. And then, in you talking, it also made me realize that I'd made a mistake when talking with Swan about the deep ball stuff, because he did have the deep ball with Trey Lance against Houston on the deep touchdown. So there you go.
Good call. And that was that Sherfield play flipped the opposite way from the preseason.
Kind of, in a similar, yes.
Similar. He adjusted his route, flattened it because of coverage. But so one thing I wanted to touch on, though, that you made me think of was Deebo kind of ended up fulfilling the role that Jalen Hurd was supposed to fill, right? He was supposed to be that running back receiver guy,
Yeah, in a way.
So I'm wondering, first off, what do you think of the chances that maybe he could come back to life? And then more importantly, this is my big question that nobody's talking about. What's going on with Juwan Jennings? Because he's not signed right now. And I see him as an emerging player, a very, very good player, and a key piece. As much time as Deebo spends in the backfield, you got to have somebody key to put out there. I think Juwan is a big piece. So he's not signed right now.
Okay, yeah. So they extended him the exclusive rights offer, right?
Okay.
But in terms of like his role, I actually see Jennings as more of the Hurd type of a player, because so Hurd was a guy that they were going to hand him the ball every once in a while. They might hand him the ball, but they really were utilizing him more as like a second tight end, like a big wide receiver that can play inside and kind of open up things. And I think that's what they see in Juwan Jennings, as a guy who he can be your third receiver, but you can still do all the same things you do out of a 2 tight end set, because he's big and blocks like a tight end. Right. Not as good as a tight end, but he's able to get in front of his guy and hold him up like you would expect a middle of the road tight end to do in terms of blocking. But he's a much better receiver.
Yeah, he's aggressive, and I mean he's just aggressive in his nature. And I think he's emerging. I think from my perspective, and I would say that he's actually has a higher potential, a higher ceiling than Kendrick Bourne did. I think that his ability to catch the ball, you don't see a lot of drops with Juwan, and his toughness and his blocking, and he's got that twitch, but he's still a bigger guy.
Yeah.
I think he has the potential to be special.
I do too. I really like him.
Do you think they need another guy though? I mean, that Scandling was out there for a little bit or whatever, Valdez.
They need another one, because right now they only have 4 that that you would expect to be on the roster. They have more than that on the roster right now, but
Right.
but I think 3 or 4 of those guys are, reserve future kind of contracts that would probably end up more in the practice squad or something like that. You wouldn't really expect them to be on your final 53-man roster if the season was to start tomorrow.
Right.
So I do expect to see them add a receiver or two. The draft is going to be one of those areas. I think they're going to get a receiver, and then I think you might see one later, soon in free agency. As we get down the road here.
And we got a poor man's Tyreek Hill and Ray, right? That's what we're shooting for.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, either that or even a poor man's Deebo Samuel in a way, right? Because of the underneath stuff, and he's got that quick twitch and stuff.
You bet.
Yeah.
You bet.
Yeah.
One last question for you.
Sure.
Do you see them maybe pushing more down to left guard to fill for Lakin? I mean, he played well at tackle, but to me, it seems that he's a natural fit for that guard position. He's not overly big. Mm-hmm. I just wonder if that's kind of where they're leaning there.
I think my gut tells me that Aaron Banks is going to be the guy that goes to the left guard spot, and that Jalen Moore will be working in at right guard, right tackle over there.
Swing tackle, maybe.
Either in the swing tackle role, or if Mike McGlinchey isn't healthy, he's going to be the guy that fills in over there. And it'll be interesting to see if they're able to make they got to make a step in year 2. The 49ers are putting a lot of faith in them, and guys can do that. That's one of the things, I was talking yesterday. You tend to see, like, Tom Compton in 2020 was awful in training camp and just he was getting slammed, and all of a sudden here in 2021 he had a heck of a season for the 49ers. So I can understand people who are maybe a little bit on edge about Aaron Banks and Jalen Moore and those two in particular, but I'm kind of giving them maybe too much of a benefit of the doubt right now.
I actually agree with you. I think that, especially when it comes to offensive linemen, they come in, no matter how big they are, no matter how strong they are, that's a man's game in the trenches. And it even took Lakin Tomlinson some time, right? He was kind of a bust in Detroit before we got him. Yes. So I think that year off, basically could very well benefit Aaron. I definitely think from that position he can make a lot of gains. Hopefully he can fill that spot. It's interesting, though. Have we heard about Alex Mack coming back? Is that a possibility? Because if he doesn't, does Brunskill move to center? I mean, there's so many. It's interesting, right?
Yeah, there's some moving parts there. I mean, the last we heard about Mack was from the NFL Combine. Lynch talking to the Bear reporters and separately from the podium, they had a separate session, and he told them that he expects right now they've been in good communications. Things are going good with Alex Mack, and I don't think he said they expect to have him back, but I think he just said things are progressing in the right direction or something along those lines. He always leaves himself open so that he's not necessarily wrong. Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
Right on, brother. I appreciate your time, man.
Oh man, I appreciate you calling up. That was a lot of fun. Make sure you call in any time that I'm doing this, because that was a good conversation. I appreciate you.
You bet, Jack. Have a
good
weekend. Bye.
Yeah, you too. Take care. Bye-bye. All right, real quick, I'm going to hit a couple super chats, and then we're going to wrap it up for today. Jig Wild, thank you very much for the donation. I appreciate it. He says, Jack, as with most young players who come into the league and set it on fire like Mahomes, the media anoints some Hall of Famers, but you need 12 to 15 years of production. Absolutely, I agree with you. It does take you, in order to get to that level, you do have to have an extended period. And so I'm with you 100% there, Jay. And the other piece was that's part of why when I talk about Deebo Samuel, the thing with Deebo Samuel is he has the ability to be the next great 49ers receiver. What's going to hold him back from getting there, in my opinion, is his health. So if he can stay healthy, I think when all is said and done, people are going to look back at him as probably the second best wide receiver to ever play for the 49ers. So that's the way that I feel. And that's why yesterday when I said on the level of Jerry Rice, just people are going to look at him when he's done. He might not break Rice's single season. He's not going to break Rice's career records, but he might come close to some of those single season numbers from the 49ers days. Johnny Robinson, thanks for the donation, says, what do you think Deebo will sign for? My guess is that it's going to be a contract in the range of 23 to 25 million. It might originally get talked about as being more, but when the numbers come out and we really break it down, I think we'll find out that it's probably going to be in that 23 to 25. That seems to be right around the number for most receivers, especially the ones that are in the range of a Deebo Samuel in terms of ability. And then Brian, you ask, do I consider Lance a mobile quarterback or a running quarterback? And how much will the O-line have to adapt to Lance from Jimmy G? The answer here is no, I do not. I consider Lance a mobile quarterback. I consider him somebody that can move if he has to. But Lance is much more of a pocket passer than he is. He's not a running quarterback. He's much more of a pocket passer than anything else. Think of him as a pocket passer that can move. That's the way that I look at him. When I watched him play at North Dakota State, he wants to play from the pocket and he'll move if he has to, but he doesn't. That's not his desire. He wants to make that throw from the pocket, and we saw that. That's part of why we saw that from him start one against Arizona. He's moving up, and he's got a running lane in front of him, but instead of taking off running, he throws it because he's always looking to throw before run. So that would be my take on Trey Lance. So that's it for today. I got to run. Quick show today. I appreciate everybody that jumped on though. Those the Swan and Karthik and Victory there for coming on and jumping on and talking 49ers with me. We are going to be back. I will be back on Monday with the show. I'm not sure if Rob is going to be with me or not, but if he's not, I'll probably just have you guys call in and I'll talk through my stuff and chat with you as well. So hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Saturday, 4:15 on the Pacific time, 7:15 if you're out east. So go out, enjoy the rest of your Saturday, enjoy your Sunday tomorrow, and we'll be back on Monday. Thank you all very much. Have a great day.